それでは WAC また JKC を代表して一言ご挨拶を申し上げます。
I would now like to open this seminar and just start with a short introduction as the president of the JKC and the head of today's seminar run by the WUAC and the Japan Kennel Club.
本日は平日のお忙しい中、多数の秋田県ファン社にオンラインセミナーにお集まりいただき、厚くお礼を申し上げます。
Thank you all very much for taking your time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today for this seminar. It is very exciting to see so many Akita Inu fans online with us.
また本日この後、秋田犬では有名な川北先生によるスタンダード解説が予定されております。
After this brief introduction, we will have a seminar on the Akita Inu standard by the world-renowned Akita Inu specialist and judge, Mr. Akita.
古き先輩が基礎になるスタンダードがあり、秋田犬の現在があることも皆さん忘れないでいただきたいと思います。
I would like to remind everybody that today's Akita Inu is with us because of this standard that was left to us by the previous generations of breeders and judges.
WAC また JKC では今後重要な課題はスタンダードやブリーディングにおいて動物の福祉、動物愛護が大きな課題です。
In today's world, and we have ever-changing legislation and rules. However, today with the WUAC and the JKC, we have many issues we're coming up against in the preservation of this breed with regard to the standard and also animal welfare legislation.
犬たちの快適性イコール福祉と愛護を意識した検出の向上を WAC また JKC も進めてまいります。
The WAC and JKC will strive to move forward with the preservation of the Akita Inu and its welfare and care.
皆様方もより良い愛犬家の一員であることを忘れずに秋田犬検出向上をしていただけたら幸いです。
I would like to remind everybody that we are all here with the breed as fans of the breed. I remember that as lovers of the Akita Inu, hopefully we can all preserve the breed properly and carry it forward into the future.
結びに本日研修セミナーが皆さんのさらなる検出の向上になることを記念いたしましてご挨拶と返させていただきます。
In closing, it is my wish that today's seminar will help to give guidance toward a better understanding of the standard and help us to preserve the breed correctly.
続いて、川北先生並びに通訳の加藤さんのプロフィールを紹介させていただきます。
Next, we will have a short introduction of today's speaker, Akita Sensei, and myself as interpreter. So, Akita Sensei, Mr. Kosuke Akita, is a very well-known Akita specialist. His involvement with Akita Inu began in 1956, and he has been breeding Akitas since 1960, producing many champions. Besides Akitas, he is now also involved in breeding Shiba Inu and has achieved great success there as well. He was approved to judge the Akita Inu by Akiho in 1970 and has judged at many shows throughout Japan. In the Japan Kennel Club, he was approved as a breed judge for the Akita in 2006 and later authorized to judge the American Akita, the Shiba, the Hokkaido, the Kai, the Kishu, and the Shikoku. He has been judging these breeds not only in Japan, but also in the United States, Taiwan, Finland, France, and Italy, among others. Besides judging at these dog shows, he also lectures at many Akita Inu seminars, both here in Japan and abroad, contributing to the spread of knowledge concerning the true type of Akita Inu. As for myself, I was born here in Japan in 1979. I am a translator and interpreter. I've worked in many different fields with many different international brands such as Armani and Red Bull. I became involved into the Nihonken through hunting, actually. And I've been working with these Japanese dogs in the mountains for over 20 years now. I am a longtime member of the Japan Kennel Club, the Kaiken Aigokai, Akiho, the Hokkaido Ken Hozonkai, the Dainihon Hunters Association, and I'm currently the head of public relations for the Nippo Chiba branch as well. I've been involved with hunting, breeding, and showing the Nihonken for most of these 20 years, and I currently breed Shikoku and Kishu here in Japan. I've been invited by kennel clubs worldwide as a guest speaker to discuss hunting with the Japanese breeds, and I've been also translated for many dog shows and seminars such as the 2023 Japan Specialen in Norway. It is also my pleasure to be with you today. So today's seminar, we will be moving through the FCI standard, which is based off of the standard from the Akita Hozonkai. We will not have time to go through the entire standard in its entirety due to time, the amount of time we have. So we will start by going over some important points. Here we will start with general appearance, which is Ippan Gaibo.
一般外貌ということについてお話しいたします。一般外貌で一番大切なことは成長生じということです。
はい、
成長の成は外部陰部のことです。
はい、
長とは明確なだとか正確なだとかそういう意味で犬を見たときに秋田犬を見たときにオスかメスかその後犬がはっきりと性を表示できるということが大事だと思っております。
はい。So in general appearance, possibly the most important thing in the Akita Inu is sexual dimorphism. To be able to see immediately when one glances at a dog whether it is a male or a female. A male should be masculine, a female should be feminine, and this should be apparent from the very first glance.
こちらにオスが4頭おります。こちらがメスが4頭です。
So to start with, we have four example males here in this photo, and 4 example females.
これらのオスが大地を踏んで正確な皮脂の落とし位置、面積、非常に立派なものだと思っております。かしてこの犬たちが他犬に対して低い緊張感と首輪から引き綱につながってくるこの犬たちがオスたちが軽くお腹でうなってる声がハンドラーには伝わってくるはずです。
So, just taking a look at these 4 pictures of these Akita males, some of the more modern Akita males, as well as we've included also a historical Akita male picture here. But just in looking at the pictures, we can see how the males are proportioned, the way that they are standing strongly, planted to the ground. One can almost hear a deep, low growl coming from these males who are obviously giving a very masculine air.
その時の犬の表情、表現、これはそのオスとして鍛えた体を角度で見せるこの素晴らしさ、これがオスの特徴でございます。オスは角度で見せるということが特徴です。
So not only in the expression of these males do we see a lot of masculinity, but also in their proportions, obviously. And it is my personal feeling that the males show that their qualities best through their angles, correct angles.
これらの犬はオスもメスも秋田犬保存会歴史に残る名犬だと思っております。そしてこの4頭のメスについて次から話します。
It is my opinion that these males are very good examples of the Akita Inu male, the breed today, and will leave their legacy with us for many years to come. And now we will move on to the female pictures.
この4頭のメス、これも 秋田犬保存会歴史に残る犬でございます。非常にその内面の確かな獅子をしっかりと大地に向けて立っております。これらはやはりメスらしい品格と優しさ、これはやっぱりこの表情というものは曲線で見せるっていうのがメスの特徴です。
Right. So the females, we can see also that they have a very strong stance as well in the ring, but one should also almost feel an air of gentleness in their expression. In comparison to the males, where we see much more strength and we are looking at their angles, in the females, we are looking for something a little bit different, something a little bit more feminine.
このメス、曲線で見せるメス、それから角度で見せるオス、どの犬たちも素晴らしいものだと思って、俺は参考になる犬だと思っております。
So in the females, we see much more of their beauty in curves as opposed to the males, where we see them in stronger angles. So that's probably the biggest difference that he would describe in what we're seeing in the general appearance of a male and a female. So we're seeing more angles, strength, mass, and in the females we're seeing more beauty and elegance and the curves.
これだけの名犬たちの欠点というのはございます。その欠点を見るのではなく、この犬たちが表現している良さ、それをぜひ見て参考にしてほしいと思っております。
No dog is perfect. Even these great dogs that he believes will all leave their legacy in the breed, they all have their flaws. But one should be able to see past these small flaws and look at the greater impressive qualities that a dog has in order to create better dogs.
欠点は誰が見てもすぐ分かります。良さが難しいのでございます。その点、良さを十分に勉強していただきたいと思っております。
He said it is very easy for someone to pick out flaws in a dog. It is much harder to see the good traits in a dog and truly value them.
良さが分かって一人前という言葉が日本にはございます。
When one is finally able to not see only the flaws, but to actually focus on the good traits of a dog, then one truly becomes an expert.
欠点を羅列して自慢している方もいらっしゃるが、そうじゃなく良さを認めて、良さを褒めてほしいというふうに思っております。以上です。
There are some people who would sit and focus on the faults of any given dog, but he would, if he could leave everyone with something, it would be to look for the good qualities in a dog, value those, and use those in your breeding. That we will now be moving on to the next portion of the standard, which is the head, cranial region, facial region, which will cover the nose, muzzle, lips. はい、では、頭部の方をお願いします。
頭部全体のことに対して、これからお話しいたします。まず秋田犬の特徴であります立ち耳巻き尾っていうのがございます。その立ち耳が頭に当然ついております。その点、耳からまず耳の付着位置からお話ししたいと思っております。
So we will start with the head and the overall balance and position of all the parts. It is often said that it is often expressed that the Akita is a breed with standing ears and a curled tail. This is the basis of the standard. Naturally, these ears should be sitting on the head, so we'll start there. はい。
この犬は耳の付き位置、頭部の位置、頬のよく発達した張った頬、興奮の作り、すべてがやっぱり理想的なこの2頭の頭骨だと思っております。
He would consider that this dog is a good example of a well-rounded head, correctly placed ears, a good and even muzzle, and well-developed cheeks.
この下顎を見てください。 ちゃんとした顎がこれ見えてるしっかりした古墳でございます。
Please particularly note the underjaw, very visible underjaw in a very well-developed muzzle.
例えばこの犬が5ヶ月の時の耳の位置が目の水線から外視から水線が耳の半分まで来てます。こういうもののこれが大人になると耳の位置っていうのは頭につくもんであって、これもうちょっと下がると頬についてるっていう感じになります。それが成犬になるとこういきます。この犬がこうなったように耳がやっぱり位置が下がってます。
はい。So, as you can see from these illustrations, the correct position, the correct position of the eye in relation to the ear should be where the underline of the eye draws a line that reaches the outside lowest point of the ear. That's the correct position on the head for the ear to be set. We do see some dogs where the ears are set too far out on the side. And Kawakita Sensei is using this dog as an example of a dog that, while maturing, the ears were actually a bit too far on the side. You can see the line draws a point to the middle of the ear as opposed to the outside corner of the ear. But through maturity, the ears actually went to the correct position. So this is something that he would like everyone to keep in mind, is that while the dog is maturing, sometimes the ears can move in relation to the head. So that will conclude our explanation about the ears and the eye set, the correct eye set and the correct position of the ears on the head. Next, we will be moving forward to a discussion about the muzzle and the lips of the Akita Inu. This will be our next section. So again, continuing with the cranial region, facial region, we're going to discuss the stop, the lips, and the muzzle. はい、お願いします。
ストップからお話しいたします。
So we will start with the stop. ストップ、興奮というのは頭蓋の頂からここまでがここがストップです。これが6、こっちがこうストップから微胸の先までが4、だから3対2になります。それでストップの長さっていうのは興奮の長さがここからここまでが長さです。いいですか。ここから下までがストップから下顎の下までが厚みです。 So this is the head of the Akita. So we have the forehead and the top of the muzzle. The length of the muzzle is the point from the end of the nose to the stop. This point here is the stop, where the forehead drops onto the muzzle. According to the standard, the correct proportion is a 3-to-2 ratio. So 6 for the forehead, 4 for the length of the muzzle. This is the thickness of the muzzle.
ストップの理想はこの微量からの水線とこの頭からの水線がこれが平行であるということがあるということが一つの基本になっております。
Right. So the preferred, according to the standard, lines of the angles of the forehead and the muzzle is that the line drawn from the top of the forehead and the line drawn across the top of the muzzle should be parallel to each other.
それで最近よく見られる犬が
This is a flaw seen in some dogs
この水
recently.
線がこの水線とここでぶつかってしまう平行ではないと、これがストップが深いっていうことです。ここが深いということ、この角度ですね。
In dogs where the stop is too sudden, where the angle is too deep, we see the drop from the forehead and the top line drawn from the top of the muzzle will actually meet at a point here because the stop is too sudden and too deep, and this is incorrect.
これが一応興奮ストップの角度の基本になっております。
So this is the foundation or the basic data concerning the stop for the Akita Inu.
次にリップに移ります。
Next, we will move on to the lips of the Akita Inu.
リップと下顎に移ります。
はい。
最近犬を秋田犬の展覧会また犬を見ていますと気になる欠点というのがこのリップの上顎の上唇の皮膚弛緩というのかな、緩さ、そういうもの、それから下顎、正面から見たときに下顎が見えない。
Something that Kawakita Sensei has noticed recently over the past couple of years definitely is that there is a trend towards dogs with loose lips and dogs where the lower jaw is not visible when we see the dog in profile.
こういうふうになってる。これがここに下顎がこういうふうにあるから秋田犬の横顔としては成立するんですけど、これがこういうふうに興奮の細い犬になります。
こちらですよね。
そうです。こういう犬がこれが横から見たときに下顎が見えない。この犬もそうです。
So, as an example of this, when the dog is seen from the side, we should be able to see the lower jaw under the upper jaw. This is an example of some dogs where the lower jaw is invisible.
こういうところに日本犬特有のその魅力、その良さっていうものが出てくるんです。これが例えばこういう下顎のうんとこう垂れた犬、このために中の下顎が見えない、下顎にかぶっちゃってる上唇です、これ。
So it's these details of the standard that call for tight lips that give an elegance to the Nihonken's expression, and it is the lack of these that will actually, unfortunately, ruin a dog's expression.
だから下顎のしっかりした犬っていうのは、興奮のしっかりした犬っていうのはこれを口角と申します。口角がしっかり上顎と上唇と下唇が交差したところが口角と言いまして、これが日本犬のいいところです。これが緩んじゃってこうなっちゃうともう困ります。
So this point here where the upper lip and the lower lip meet is called the kokaku, and this is a very important part of having tight lips. This is a correct tight lip. It gives balance and fullness to the muzzle, and unfortunately we don't want to see dogs where we have loose upper lips covering the lower jaw.
犬種にはいろいろ欠点がありますが、日本犬秋田犬として日本犬の中で秋田犬だけがこういう欠点を如実に表現しているのは、例えば中型小型にはこういう欠点はございません。その点が秋田犬の血液の問題点というのはあります。
While every breed has its faults and its things that need to be worked on, loose lips like this is something we generally only see in the Akita Inu out of the 6 Japanese breeds. We will not see this in, or at least this pronounced in any of the other Japanese breeds, so this is something that we need to work on to correct.
皆さん上顎が一直線、下顎も一直線でここに結ばれているところが口角、こういうものをぜひ考えてご自分の犬も見てみてください。
So everyone, please remember these type of dogs. This is what we want to be looking for. If you can look at these in dogs that you are judging yourselves or your own dogs, is to remember we want to see these clean lines, a clean line, a break between the upper and lower lip, tight lips.
これ図が下手だけど、これが鼻です。
He says, please bear with me and my art, but this is the nose when seen from the front.
リップね。
はい
それで、これもうちょっと。この角度を言いたいです。
はい。So an important point and something he would like to stress is this angle here in the front.
そうです。それで、これがしっかりしたものは、この角度が大きいです。
A dog with correct upper, lower jaw and lips, this angle will be very shallow. Here we see the lower jaw and the lips.
例えば、この犬の角度、この犬の角度、見てみなさい。これ見れば一目瞭然だと思います。
はい。
こういうのは広いです。
Right. So we can see in some of these examples of some of the dogs that we have pictures of here, a very shallow angle in the front, like this. A very sharp angle. It's like a triangle here. And some of the examples we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are all examples of dogs with slightly too loose lips.
こういう犬たちが運動なんかで体を動かした時にここで息する。唇がこう動くってわかるよね。
Dogs like this, when you're exercising them or if with anything strenuous, they'll actually be breathing through their lips, which is
ここがね、
yes.
ここで息しちゃうってことだからこういうのもみんないいものもここが出てんだけどこれがかぶっちゃってるからこのバカバカするってことだよね。
Yeah, so as he stated earlier, not all dogs are perfect and every dog has its flaws, but it is something to be aware of. We're looking for tight lips like these dogs here, very nice unbroken line there.
それと正面から見たときにこの興奮というのはちょっと図が悪いけどこう丸く見えるのがこれらは丸く見えないでしょ。こうなってきてる、はい、これらはねじゃなくて本当にいい興奮というのはこう丸いもんです。これなんかの丸くなってるはずだ。
A correct muzzle should give the appearance of roundness. So as examples of these dogs, we see a lot of roundness here. This is not what we are looking for, this kind of shape, which is what you see in a dog like this. This is incorrect. We want to see roundness.
Yes.
Okay, that is all. That concludes this section, which was about the lips and muzzle. And now we're going to be moving into the next part of the standard that we're going to cover, which is the tail. Ono.
先ほど興奮のことをお話ししましたけど展覧会見て最近の気になるところっていうのは先ほどのマグロの作り馬唇の緩さそういう気になります。下顎の薄さ北側気になりますが最近秋田犬のその尾の型尾というものは立ち耳巻き尾っていって秋田犬の一大特徴その尾の作り方が非常に不自然なね、品格のない尾っぽが見えてくるんです。大事なことだなと思ってます。
So moving on to the next section, in shows here in Japan and overseas, he has seen, as he mentioned in the last section, dogs with lips that are too loose, thin lower jaws. And this thin lower jaw has actually also been scientifically proven. We have data that shows that this is connected to a loss of teeth. And for a breed with its roots in working dogs and hunting dogs, loss of teeth and loss of bite force, things that are connected to a thinner lower jaw, are something we want to be very aware of. But to go with this, this trend towards some dogs with lips that are too loose and thin lower jaw, another thing he has seen is dogs with incorrect tails, tails that are too tight or with shorter, longer.
こういう尾っぽがね巻きながらこう表に跳ねる。 これは尾の毛が柔らかいこの犬は尾が短い。やはりその尾っていうものは秋田犬の一大特徴なものなんでね、しっかりした尾でありたいな。要するに体に馴染めない尾っていうのがこういう尾です。本当にこれなんかは理想とする尾の形だと思います。
はい。So, a correct tail. This is fairly close to a correct tail according to the Akita standard. And we'll see tails now sometimes in show where you have a double curl or almost a triple curl. Also tails that have incorrect little spring in them or broken tails. Some tails that are too long, too short. And as Kakita Sensei just said, the most important thing is for the tail to be in balance with the proportions of the rest of the body. We can see that a tail like this is too short for a dog of this size. And also we have dogs where the tail is set back too far onto the back of the dog. And we also see this dog has some very soft coat and soft tail length. Yeah.
尾っぽに関して以上ですけど、こういうのはダメだ、確かにいい尾っぽの巻き方じゃないんですけど、これによって一頭減ずるってことはあるかもしれないけど、それ以上の失格だとかそういうことはありません。ただ尾を巻かざる犬は失格になるかもしれないけど、これはこれで脊髄を考慮するっていう形になると思います。
はい。So he says we're seeing dogs like this in the ring in Japan and overseas, and it's something that we would like to correct. This is not a disqualifying fault, but it's just a small flaw, something to correct in your breeding and something we should try and correct as preservation breeders moving forward. The standard calls for a tail that's set on high, thick, and carried vigorously curled over the back. In Japanese we say yudai noって言いますよね. Like almost a magnificent tail. Right. So this will conclude our section on the tail of the Akita Inu. Moving forward into the next section, we will now be discussing the movement and the proper angulation and structure of the Akita Inu. And for this section, we would like to ask our JKC President Besha-san to come forward and explain a little bit about the movement and correct angles. お願いします。
はい、それでは、講義を変わります。私が担当するのは、骨格構成学と筋肉解剖学をお話しさせていただきます。
So we will just, for this section, we will be changing speakers, and I would like to explain a little bit about the structure and then also the musculature of the Akita Inu.
これは秋田犬の前肢と後肢の、図解です。
This is a drawing of the hindquarters and the correct angles and names for the front and back of the Akita Inu.
ここで、注意していただきたいのはここの角度です。で、非常に開いてます。
What I would like to draw particular attention to is this angle here of the forequarters. It's a very shallow angle. Some of you may have noticed.
で、それに伴って後肢の角度も深くはありません。
And similar to this, we can see that the angulation in the hindquarters as well is, well, it's not overly angulated.
で、この起因と申しますのは、まず日本犬が狩猟犬であるっていうことが重要です。
And the reason for this is that the Japanese breed is a hunting breed.
クマまたはイノシシを狩る上で、一つ間違ったら犬たちも、爪で殺されたり、角で殺されたりするっていうことが考えられます。
The Japanese breeds, especially the medium size and the large breeds like the Akita, are hunting breeds used to hunt wild boar, dangerous game like wild boar and bear. One wrong move and an inability to move would cause certain injury and death.
その時にまず逃げるっていう場合にまずジャンピングドッグとしてジャンプして逃げるっていう作用が必要です。
For a dog that's hunting in these sort of situations, firstly, the most important thing in their movement is an ability to move quickly, to jump quickly.
で、当然ここの角度を浅くしてここの角度を浅くして跳ねるっていう作業をするためのこの角度になっています。
And this is what has led to this shallow angle for both the forequarters and the hindquarters, is the necessity for the dog to be able to dodge quickly and to jump quickly from side to side.
でこれを比較していただくために次シェパードの角度構成をお見せします。
He would like to, in comparison, he would like to compare the angles we're seeing here with the angles we would see in a German Shepherd.
で非常にここの角度が深くなっています。浅いこの角度と全く違って非常に深くなっています。
We can see here that in the German Shepherd we have a very deep angle.
で当然ここの格子の角度も非常に寛骨が角度が深くて大腿が短くて下体を長くする。
We can also see in the rear quarters we also have much more angulation in the rear quarters as well, and very different proportions to what we would see in the loin of the Akita Inu, of the Nihonken.
そうですね。でここで比較していただくのはまずシェパードは刺激犬で非常にストライドを要する犬です。
So here what he would like to draw attention to is that the German Shepherd is a working dog, but is a dog where stride and reach is very important.
でこれと比較していただいたらここで何を求める歩様かっていうのは軽快である歩様で軽快であるイコールショートトラックであるっていうことが必要になります。
And in comparison, the Nihonken and by inclusion the Akita Inu, they are a hunting breed. And this angulation, their job calls for a different type of angulation, a more shallow angle. And this would lead to a different type of movement, a movement much closer to short tracking.
で多くの間違いを犯すのはショードッグとして非常にこういう角度構成を求めてストライドのある歩様を求めるんですけどその歩様ではありません。
And it's a mistake that is easy to make, but often in the show ring, a dog will be rewarded or we'll be looking for dogs with more reach or stride. But this is a mistake when judging the Nihonken, as that is not what we are looking for.
再度もう一回言いますけどここの角度構成の違いを考えていただいて前肢の角度構成後肢の角度構成が違うっていうことの歩様を審査員の方もオーナーの方ブリーダーの方も意識して繁殖または審査をされることが重要です。
In closing this section about movement, he would like to draw attention again to the difference in proportion in angles between a German Shepherd and what is correct for an Akita Inu or Nihonken. We are looking for a different type of angle for a job, for a dog that does a different type of job, which will lead to a different movement. The Akita Inu will have a short tracking movement with light. The standard calls for a keikai nahoyo, which is light movement, light, agile, and springy. Whereas for a continental working breed, we're looking for much more length in their movement and much more stride. And this is not what we're looking for in the Akita Inu.
次に筋肉解剖学に入ります。
And he would just like to discuss a little bit about the musculature and the type of muscle.
まず人間も犬も混合筋っていう筋肉で成り立っています。
So this can be the same can be said for humans as well as for the dogs, is that we are made up of a musculature that includes two different types of muscles.
でその混合筋っていうのは白筋と線筋の混合バランスの混合筋です。
So these muscles, these two different types of muscles are white muscles and red muscles.
でシンプルな話をして皆さん方がお分かりやすいのは魚の筋肉です。
To simplify this for everyone to be able to understand, he would like to use an analogy with fish.
魚の場合は白筋と接筋で単筋っていう一つの筋肉で形成されています。
So in fish we have white fish and red fish, and it's very easy to see because there's not so much of a combination of both.
で接筋の場合は長く遠洋で泳ぐ魚ですね。例えばマグロとかそういう魚ですね。
So the fish with red meat, they are the type of fish like tuna, the maguro we all love, that swim long distance swimmers at speed.
で逆に白筋の単筋の魚は 例えばヒラメとか獲物が来たら瞬間的に動く犬です。動く魚ですね。
So the mussels with like short strand mussels are seen in the white mussels. So whitefish, fish like flounder that sit on the bottom of the ocean, but then need sudden movement to either take prey or to get away from prey.
で今話が元に戻りますけど、犬の場合ですね、例えばこのシェパードなんかは非常に混合筋の接近のバランスがものすごく多いです。
In a breed like, and going back to dogs, in a breed like the German Shepherd, we would say that while they're a combination of these long strand and short strand muscle fibers, they have much more of the type of muscle that would lead to long distance movement.
で逆に、テリアなんかですね、例えばネズミが来た場合、ネズミが倉庫でお米とかを食べに来た場合、瞬間的に噛み殺すっていう作業をするんで、非常に逆に今度は発筋が多くなります。
But for a breed like the terriers, where they need to be able to have much more sudden movement, they need to be able to suddenly react to the movement of their prey, which would be small rodents and things like that, which is what they traditionally do for work. We would see a high percentage of the short strand muscles, white muscles.
で総合的に狩猟犬の場合はやっぱり長時間走るんで、接近が多いバランスになります。
In total, for hunting and working breeds, well, especially hunting breeds, we would see a higher percentage of red type muscle because they do need to cover a lot of ground and they do need to run quite a bit.
でもっと繊細に言えば、犬種で例えば秋田犬でも四国犬でも柴犬でも、その犬によって混合筋のバランスは多少変わってきます。
But here, even in the Japanese breeds, of which there are 6, we would see sometimes even a small difference in percentage between the different breeds because their working style is a little bit different.
でここで重要なことっていうのは、筋肉、じゃあどういう筋肉が正しいのかって言えば、体質が硬くて筋肉が柔らかいイコール柔らかい筋肉はイコール長距離で使えるっていう筋肉を求めています。
So we're often looking for a dog that is put together very tightly in the Japanese breeds, as it would be how we describe it. So a dog that is taut, the musculature is taut and tight, but the muscles are soft, which would then allow them to actually do long distance work as well.
ここでまた例を出してお話しさせたら、マラソンの選手ですね。マラソンの選手で筋肉の含有量がものすごく多い選手なんか一人もいないんです。で体質が硬くて柔らかい筋肉っていうのはマラソンの選手の非常に分かりやすい筋肉だと思います。
And again, to draw a comparison between canines and then humans, if we look at a marathon runner, we don't often see marathon runners with a lot of muscle bulk because what they have is a very tight musculature and skeletal body with actual soft muscles for to be able to cover long distance.
で審査員の方でもブリーダーの方でもチェックしていただきたいのは、筋肉の含有量じゃなくて筋肉の柔らかさを求めるべきです。
So something he would like for judges and for breeders to take note of in dogs that you're judging or in your own dogs is not necessarily the amount of muscle, but more the type of muscle that the dog has.
ただし犬種によって今先ほど言いましたテリアなんかは白筋の含有量が多いんで瞬発力の犬なんで、またそのタイプが違って狩猟犬なんかとか飼育犬に関しては非常に含有量が変わってきます。
はい。But he will add in closing that these types of muscles will differ by breed. So in a terrier, you may be looking for a different type of muscle for a dog that is more of a sprinter and a sudden mover in a comparison to a dog like the Akita Inu. But he just wanted to point out that we do have these different types of muscles for people to be aware of and to try and keep maintaining the breed.
じゃあここで最終的にまとめさせていただいたら、 ここの前肢後肢日本犬のこの骨格構成で関して言えばまず軽快な歩様であるストライドは要求してませんよということをもう一度確認させていただきます。
In closing for this section, we would like to emphasize that these are the correct angles. They're much more shallow than maybe we would see in other breeds, and this would affect the movement of the breed. We are not looking for a breed with stride, covering distance.
でもう一つ筋肉の解剖学で言えば体質が硬くて柔らかい筋肉決して含有量があるからいい筋肉っていうわけではないっていうことも確認させていただきます。
Right. And then also to remember that we are looking for a certain type of muscle. It's soft muscle with a tight, strong body. So these two things about the correct movement for the Akita Inu, which is a short stride. We are not looking for long reach or long strides. We are looking for short tracking movement and also the type of muscle that we're looking for in them.
はい、それでは私のアナトミーと、筋肉解剖学のセクションを終わらせていただきます。
Thank you very much. That's the end of Besho-san's section on the movement and structure and anatomy of the Akita Inu. And next, we will have Kawakita sensei again, and he will cover our last section of the standard, which will be about the coat of the Akita Inu. So we will cover the coloration, the hues, and also urajiro, and the correct type of coat for the breed. はい、川口さんお願いします。
白の拡大ということで、秋田犬の分解、いろいろ議論がありまして、こういうものを私が開放に発表したんですが、その時まではかなりその白の拡大が多くて、心配しておりましたが、秋田犬の分解の会員の方々が、またその世界の方々もそれに関してすごくその反応していただいて、要するに配色っていうのはこれが理想なんですけど、その前は7時代前はこんなものまでアメリカン秋田はいまだにこういうブチが、それで秋田犬でもこういうブチ、それから顔半分までのブチが出てきた時代がありました。
はい。So if we move on to coat and color in the Akita, a point we would like to cover today. And again, I would like to remind everyone that we have a very limited amount of time today, so we won't be able to cover the entire standard. But we are talking about the expansion of white in the Akita Inu. So it's something we're constantly trying to manage and stay in control of. And in the Akio Members Magazine, Kawakita sensei actually had this published as an example, some drawings to show what we are trying to achieve, what is correct, and then what we are trying to avoid. And some things we are trying to avoid is when we do not control the spread of white in the Akita Inu, we will very likely see reversion to these old types of what we would see, which was more pinto and mismarkings of the type full collars and things like this.
その結果、こういうふうに大別されます。これがマフラーと言います。首から全部首用にマフラーが巻いてる。それとその他にこのマフラーの他にこの柵がこう鉢を割ってるっていう、はい、柵割れっていうんですかね、抜け柵と言います。これの2頭に関しては秋田犬の読解では特有評価は出さないってことになりました。
はい。So we have the correct colorations or markings of the Akita Inu here on these two scenes here, these slides here. What we have here is some examples of some colorations that, well, these dogs in our current, for instance, the Akiho standard or the show ring would not be able to achieve a Tokuyu rating, which would be like an excellent. Once we see here in Japan, we'll call it like a muffler, but it's actually, I think in English we would call it a collar. So dogs that show a full collar, or also what we call here the hachiware, which is where the white is coming through from the face along the line of the forehead and splitting the color on both sides in half. So these are both faults, not disqualifying faults, but faults in the coloration that would not allow a dog to receive a tokuyu, which is an excellent.
やはりそういう意味で この白の拡大っていうのは非常に早くいきます。ですからその逆に直すのもこういうものを交配をしないということになってくると結局いずれこういうところに近づいてくると思うんです。理想はこっちに行くべきだと思います。
So the half color that we see in this dog here, this is allowed. It is not a disqualification or anything like that. It is not consider a points deduction. However, when using dogs like this, we can very quickly start to move towards an expansion of white. So it's something to be very aware of in breeding better dogs. We want to be moving towards our optimal, our preferred standard, or what the correct coat and coloration of the Akita should be, which is these two pictures here.
展覧会において2番、3番は特有は与えませんが、4番は特有は与えますが、席次はやっぱり考慮するというふうに思っています。
So numbers 2 and 3 here, both of these dogs would not be able to receive a tokuyu, which is excellent. The dog here, number 4, would be able to receive an excellent, but the judge may take into consideration this marking, and if there is an equally quality dog, he might place the other dog above this.
現在の秋田犬、こういうふうに柵が降りてきましたけど、これは逆マスクと申します。これですね。で、これをこの微量に将来の秋田犬は微量に赤がつくと目の下に薄く赤が乗ってこういう肩甲骨を隠すぐらいのかぶってくるぐらいの赤の入り方、これが理想です。
So everyone today is probably very used to seeing this modern form of Akita where we have a what is called a gyaku mask, which is an opposite mask, essentially a white mask. In the early days of the breed, we saw a lot of black masks, and to remove that, it took some time and effort. But now we have seen an expansion of white, whereas what we should actually prefer, according to the standard, is to have ingradation, but actual coloration coming down the muzzle to the point of the nose, and then a little bit of color under the eyes as well. So this is not a full red all the way to the nose, but we should see some coloration or pigmentation down to the nose. And also on the legs as well, almost down to the pasterns, we want to see red coming down the leg to the wrist.
で、配色っていうのは秋田犬の場合、四肢末端に向かって薄くなってきます。ですからこの微量に赤をのせたい、目の下に赤をのせたいっていうのは、これは体毛の濃い色がここに来るんじゃなくて薄い色が来ます。
Some point that he would like to draw attention to is that in the Akita, all the coloration as it extends to the outer extremities should fade. It's like a gradation. So we don't want to see the same type of red that you would see on the shoulder down at the wrist or the paw. It all should fade and grade beautifully into the white.
ですからこういうふうに感じで生きていきます。この逆が裏白です。
So when we look at this dog, we can see that everything that we can't see is the urajiro on the other side of this.
秋田犬、日本犬というのは上から下へ色が変わってグラデーションになって濃いグレがだんだんこう下に行って薄く、この上の毛とこの手の先、こういうところに跡が乗った時の色っていうのはこっちはともとに下へ行くに従って薄くなってきます。じゃなきゃ困ります。
So when we describe urajiro in the standard for the Akita Inu, we're not talking about just white. We're talking about how on all the ventral parts of the body we want to see lighter coloration. So it's the strongest hues and the strongest coloration up on the furthest parts away from the points of the body, and then gradually fading into lighter colors, and then eventually to the white, which is the urajiro.
配色に関してはこういう見れば分かることなんで、非常に会員の方々が 繁殖に関して、例えばその牛の犬は使わないとか、そういう配慮した交配をしていただいてるんで、最近の犬は非常にその配色に関しては素晴らしく良くなってます。
Right. Because things like coloration and hue are very visible to the human eye, they are quite easy for people to see and also to correct. So luckily, because of this, we have seen a lot of very good correction in the breed, and we're seeing very good examples of coloration in the breed now. But there was always something to remember is what the standard is, and to try and correct and breed towards that continually. Right.
赤の秋田犬の場合、赤と白とトラですけど、赤の場合やはり獅子末端に対して色がグラデーションかけてこうスーッと薄くなっていくっていうのが一つのその秋田犬の特徴。それでトラの場合はこれがその複合色の妙でそういう感じを受ける場合があります。
So in the Akita we have the three colorations. We have red dogs, white dogs, and then we see brindle as well. So obviously with the standard being based off of red dogs, we do see a lot of red dogs currently. And as I mentioned earlier, we will see this gradation of the color going towards the extreme portion of the body, getting lighter. The urajiro in a red dog and a brindle dog will be slightly different. But white dogs again will not have any visible urajiro.
白の拡大っていうのは見れば分かることですから、一般の会員方々も難しく考えないで繁殖をしていただいてるんで、非常にこの評価はしております。
So just in conclusion on this point about the expansion of white in the Akita Inu, because this is something that is it's very easy to visibly notice. He would hope that all the breeders and judges will be able to understand what the correct coloration is, and to continue to stop the expansion of white in the breed.
ちょっとだけブリンドルのトラゲのその裏地についてちょっと質問の方もあったと思うんですけど、はい、それについてちょっと説明していただきたい。
結局トラゲに関しては秋田犬の基本色っていうのは赤なんです。赤と白とトラがある。ですからその赤から派生したトラですから、結局トラゲでも赤トラが多いということで、赤トラの逆にその赤トラのなんていうんですか、そのトラゲのね味わいっていうのは非常にいいものがあるんだけど、最近どういうわけだか黒トラ、それからその霜降りトラなんていう言葉があって、そういう犬が出てきてるんで、それに関して興味のある話が随分ありますけど、トラゲのその裏白に関してどうしてもね、赤の場合は裏白が白になってくるんですよ。トラの場合はもちろんここからこう白いのがありますけど、トラから白へ移行するグラデーションがね、案外その濃い場合があるんですよ。それがだから皆さん迷うのかなと思うけど、いいと思います。
はい。So I just asked a little question about if he could expound a bit on the brindle in the Akita Inu and the correct urajiro and markings for brindle. And the standard obviously was based off of what were the majority of dogs at the time we would consider red in the Akita Inu to be the basis of the standard. So a lot of the standard was written based on red and the urajiro of these red dogs. But we have now we have white dogs as well, as you mentioned earlier, and we have the brindle dogs as well. And today in the modern Akita we have different variations of the brindle, which would be the akatora, red brindle, and we also have kurotora, which is black brindle, and then another coloration that people often refer to as shimofuri. So we have these different types of brindle. It's much easier to see the urajiro in a red dog because of the difference between red and white. And
the urajiro in brindle dogs is not going to be as pronounced because of the nature of the genetics of brindle. However, this is not a disqualification or some sort of a flaw. We are not looking for the same types of urajiro. Urajiro does not just mean just white, but it's also as long as the dog has a certain portion of white on the ventral portions where it should be, like places like the chest. 先ほども話し合ったように、胸とかに白がしっかりあれば大丈夫ですね。その大きさとかそういうのは問わないということですね。はい。So the size of the white on the chest or other portions of the body is not necessarily as important as the presence of it. And so we cannot expect that a brindle dog and a red dog will have the exact amount, the same amount of white on the body. 赤の犬とトラゲの犬は全く同じ量のその白がなくてもいいですね。
赤トラの場合ね、その赤トラに入ってる赤が、じゃあトラを抜いて赤だけにしたときにその色がうんと濃い場合があるんですよ。はい、そのなんていうのかな、噛み合わせっていうのが配色の妙が赤トラの場合難しいかもしれない。
Yes, due to the genetics of brindle in the Akita, you'll see in some Akatora dogs, some red brindle dogs, where the red, if you removed the brindle portion, the black portion, and just saw the red, it would be possibly too rich in hue for the breed. But this is something that is allowed in the brindle coloration.
ですから将来こういうところにこのくらいの配色に持ってってくれたらいいなと思ってます。
Although we would still consider that this is, for the sake of the future, moving forward, we would like to breed towards this type or this coloration. So this brings to a close this portion of the seminar for today, where we're covering the FCI standard and some points of interest. From here, we will move into some questions and answers. And because we have a limited amount of time and it's very hard to control the Zoom environment, we've asked for questions in advance from today's participants. We have a list of them that we'll be going through, and hopefully we'll be able to cover as many as possible and as clearly as possible. So I would like to be joined again by Akita Sensei and by our president, Beshel-san again, and we will just go through a list of some of these questions. So we have a few sections to work through here. And some of the first questions we have were regarding characteristics. Does the Akita remain functional for hunting? How would you describe the correct mentality, attitude of the Akita? How would you describe the differences in the sex characteristics between a male and female Akita? Does the size of the male given within the standard affect the sex characteristic? What is the essential and most important feature detail of the Akita? So we will cover these questions here. From section 1 now. では先生、まずその特徴、性格に関する質問なんですけど、秋田犬は狩猟に適していますか? So, for this first question, じゃあ最初はスタンダードの方から読み上げてよろしいですか? はい。So, for this first question, is the Akita Inu functional for hunting? I would like to refer to the standard, the FCI standard. So if we go here, it's the brief historical summary. Originally, Japanese dogs were small to medium in size, and no large breeds existed. Since 1603 in the Akita region, Akita Matagis, medium-sized bear hunting dogs, were used as fighting dogs. From 1868, the Akita Matagis were crossed with the breeds. Consequently, the size of the breed increased, but some characteristics associated with Spitz type were lost. So the breed originally did start as it has its historical basis in the medium-sized Matagi dogs. So yes, they are originally a hunting and working breed. 元はマタギ犬だったので、やっぱりそういう狩猟のそうですね、実猟の性能はあったんですけど、最近はちょっとコンパニオン道具の方に入りまして。猟に使われている犬はちょっと少なくなったりという感じですね。見たことないですね。はい。So they were originally a working breed, but today most of the Akitas have entered. Well, most of their work is as a companion breed.
And so while the majority of the breed may tilt more towards a companion breed, we do still see some dogs that still have working ability. I believe there are dogs in Northern Europe that are used for blood tracking, and some have been tested on wild game as well. And I think President Besho also had an interesting experience with while visiting the Hokkaido-ken Hozonkai's national show a few months ago. 数ヶ月ありましたね。はい。
2ヶ月ほど前ですよね、北海道犬保存会の全国展に北海道までその実猟の方の展覧会を見に行きまして、その実猟でクマを檻に入れてどのような狩猟をするかっていうテストも今現在北海道犬なんかは実際にやられています。
So it was about 2 months ago, and Besho-san was invited to see the Hokkaido-ken's national show. And there at the show, they still have a great emphasis on preserving working ability and testing working ability in the Hokkaido-ken. So they actually have a bear at the showground, and they do test dogs to see their reaction to the bear, to the live bear.
ただ難しいのは、例えば土佐犬なんかは形は遺伝の伝承で形は求められても、今刀剣なんかは刀剣ができないんで、なかなかそのスピリットのところまではいかないと思うんですよ。だから秋田犬も形は伝承できても本当にマタギ犬であるかっていうところは、多分川北さんはそこを言いたいんだと思うんですけど、正しい昔のマタギ犬であるかっていうのは今の時代になれば難しいところもあるかなっていうところは川北さんのご意見じゃないですかね。
はい。So while there are certain parts of the hunting ability that we can still try and test for, like they do at the Hokkaido-ken show, we have other breeds like the Tosa, which is originally a fighting breed, which we can't really test for anymore. So what Kakita Sensei was saying is that he hasn't really seen any Akita hunting today in the modern world is because a lot of it's very difficult to use these dogs in a modern application. So it's hard to quantify whether or not the whole breed is still functional for hunting. But we will say that some dogs still have some ability, and it is part of the preservation of the breed to try and maintain working ability in the dogs. 一応もともと狩猟犬だったので、そういう本能を残すのも保存のすごく大切な。
そうです。
はい。Moving forward, we would say the next question is, how would you describe the correct mentality, attitude of the Akita?
秋田の正しい気質と態度、やはりその秋田へのやっぱり威風堂々としているっていう、先ほどの写真の犬もありましたけど、そういうものが秋田への魅力かなというふうに私は思ってます。
Personally, I feel that the correct attitude and temperament of the Akita should be a confident and strong dog. That is a large part of the appeal or the beauty of the breed for me. はい。次はdifferences in the sex characteristics between a male and female Akita. そのオスメスの判別ですよね。まあ先ほどちょっと。
それは先ほどありましたけど、もっと簡単に言うんだったら、正確に言うんだったら、
はい、
やっぱりサイズが違いますね。
はい、
オスとメスとのサイズは体高の高さは違います。その辺がやっぱり一番の分かれ道っていうのかな。はい。
So for this question, the answer was we briefly covered this in the bit about the standard. So the differences in sex characteristics between males and females, and the Kakita Sensei's answer would be that definitely first and foremost would be size. Males should definitely be larger than females, and then of course all the other points that we covered earlier, which was that males possibly a lot of the what we're looking for is to see those good angles and then that strength in the ring presence and things like this, and then for females we are looking for more the beauty is in these curves and the roundness. This also translates into things like we were discussing this earlier, things like the eyes, where the female eye is slightly more rounded, so we're seeing a little bit more roundedness, which gives an air of a bit more gentleness, as opposed to the males, where if we're looking for more angles, we see that sharpness a little more and a bit more of that strength. And obviously other things like males have larger skulls. オスの方が頭部がちょっともうちょっと発達してたり、あと骨量がもうちょっと and then a bit more bone than the females do. But definitely size and then this whole air. The males should definitely have a more masculine air and the females should have a more feminine, almost gentler air to them. 次は What is the essential and most important feature, detail of the Akita?
秋田にとって最もその重要な特徴、これやっぱり願望だと思います。頭部だと思います。それとそのなんか自分のその相手に対して表現するその表現力っていうのかな、そういうものはやっぱ秋田犬の魅力だと思います。
So the essential, most important feature and detail in Kawita Sensei's opinion is the, well, first, definitely the expression in the breed. And we want to see also, coming through, we also want to see the character, the strength of character that a dog has. These are very important things to preserve Akita Inu type, and it's probably one of the things that draws people to the breed. Right. Okay, so moving into the next section, we have regarding structure. The first question is, do judges in Japan pay attention to construction? Next is an opinion in particular on the rears, a lot of X, I think, shanks. Also, opinion on hyper-type drifts in Europe. For example, very heavy ears, etc., etc. Is it accepted that the handler keeps the tail in place while the dog is tacked, or could this, besides structural conditions, reflect on the dog's mentality as being soft? Is it acceptable that the Akita drops its tail in the ring when it's hot, or if he is tired after a long day? So we will have about 5 questions here to go through. まずは、日本の審査員が
結局 FCI の審査員と日本の審査員の一番の大きな違いっていうのは FCI の審査員っていうのは動体視力で犬を見ようとしてる。秋田犬のほど日本の秋田犬の審査員っていうのは静止状態の感覚で犬を見るから、それはやっぱり審査方法の違いってこともあるのかもしれないけど、そういう意味で一番違うと思う。だからその日本の審査員が体育構成に注意を払っていないってことじゃなくて、日本の、審査部では秋穂の審査部では例えば講師友のね施設角度の棒状のものに対しては得意を与えないだとか、前胸部の貧弱なものに対してはやっぱり一等をずるとか、そういうことはやっております。
はい。So the judging styles, everyone is probably aware in an FCI ring, and then in the ring, for instance, in Akiho in Japan is quite different. So Japanese judges, to answer shortly, the short answer would be that Japanese judges do pay attention to construction, but we are looking at it in a different context. He believes that FCI judges are probably looking for how the structure is in movement, when the animal's in movement, whereas judges in Japan are looking more for how the structure of the dog is in when it is still and standing. So there are definitely, when the judges for, say, Akiho get together and discuss points to correct in the breed and things like this, they will try and focus on things like several years ago, straight rears, to not give higher placements to dogs that are too straight in the rear and things like this. But in general, it is a different style of judging in the FCI in Japan. He feels where in an FCI show you're going to see a lot more movement and focus on the movement of the dog, whereas in Japan we'll focus more on the dog when it is still and the correct structure of the dog when it is still. はい。はい。
もっとシンプルで言えば、オールブリードで言えばヘッドブリーディングであるっていうタイプなんですよ。だからフレンチブルドッグとかイングリッシュブルドッグとかコリーなんかであればもう6割7割は頭部を優先するんです。だから例えばフレンチブルドッグとかイングリッシュブルドッグでサイドビューがねいくら良くても顔が悪かったら落とすっていう意味合いで言えば同じ表現なのかもしれないですね。
So Besho-san had a very nice insight, is that the judging of the Japanese breeds here in Japan is probably quite similar from an all-breed perspective to breeds like the bulldogs and French bulldogs, where possibly 60 to 70% of the weight placed on the evaluation of any dog will be placed on the head, so it would be considered head breeding. So the expression and head of the dog would have that much weight on the dog's placement in the ring. So in that regard, the Japanese breeds being judged in Japan, it's quite similar. It is a definite preservation of type, and type is seen to be most well expressed through the expression. はい。次は、講師の質問ですね。
このいいんですか？
そうですね。
X 脚の答えについてのご意見、
はい、
この X 脚の犬がいたら私は後輩には使いません。ということは、いい結果が今までなかったので、難しいです。
The short answer would be that for dogs, if he sees a dog with like an X-type rear, sort of a cow-hocked dog, that he would not use these dogs. He would not show these dogs, and he would not use them for breeding. He hasn't seen any good results from it. はい。じゃあ次に行きますと、
これわかんない。
ヨーロッパにおける
ハイパータイプって
理事長
はい
かな、ハイパータイプ、ヨーロッパのハイパータイプの流れについて教えて。
例えば耳が重すぎる犬が多くなってきたとか、あともっとハイパータイプだから、
ハイパーって
過剰、
行き過ぎちゃってる、
行き過ぎたタイプ、
行き過ぎちゃってるタイプです。
例えばもっと四角い犬、もっと赤い犬、
タイプね。
もっと目が切れてる犬とか、
まあ
でスタンダードより行き過ぎちゃう。
そういう傾向が
一番は耳の角度なんかやったらものすごい前後のきつい犬とか、または毛質ですよね。後から出てくると思うんです。また多分後から出てくるので、また毛質は後から言いますけど、
はい、
やっぱり耳の前後が強すぎるような犬が見受けられるような気がしますね。
はい。So Besho-san's comment on the hyper-type drifts is that, well, one, for example, that we do see sometimes is very heavy ears, where the ears are angled too far forward. And these type of hyper-types are something that we want to definitely avoid and stay away from. We'll have some conversation about Akita coats a little bit further in from some of the questions, so we might cover some of these hyper-type things in the coat section. はい、次は、尾の保持に関してですね、ハンドラーが尾を手で持つとか、そういうのはどうですかねと。
これ瞬間的にね、尾を直すっていうんだったら許容はできるけど、直さざるを得ないような要するにその年中下げたまま来るとかね、秋田の動会では尾を巻かざるものは失格っていうことになってますので、これ立ち耳巻き尾っていうその一大
なるほど。
あれから外れてるんで、
はい。
厳重に注意してます。
はい。So for a dog to momentarily lower its tail in the ring is allowed, but for a dog to need to have support in order for the tail to remain standing and erect, that is incorrect because it's against the standard which calls for a dog with a correctly curled tail. Which is actually, if the dog doesn't have a correctly curled tail, it could be a disqualifying fault, one of the few disqualifying faults for the breed. So this is something that momentarily to drop your tail a little bit can be allowed, but not for a handler to need to hold the dog's tail in place. はい。
いいですか？
はい。
FCI の場合でも、巻き尾、立ち尾の場合ですよね。はもし下げたりしたら、それはやっぱり性格上問題があるっていうことで、評価の対象では下がります。
はい。Besho-san has a little bit of insight for us from the FCI viewpoint for curl tails and sickle tails. So for a momentarily dropping of the tail is allowed, but for a dog to be showing that it is unable to maintain its tail on its own in a correct fashion does show a weakness, a possible weakness in the dog's character and temperament, and should be judged accordingly. The next question is quite similar, and that is it acceptable that the Akita drops its tail in the ring when it's hot or he is tired after a long day? これも同じ質問ですよね。So no, it can show a certain amount of lack of strength in the dog for the dog to be dropping tail in the ring. And while this is not a major fault, it should be considered in the judging. で、次はもう一つ検討か。はい、紐毛色に関する質問ですが、なぜブリンドルの明確な、先ほどちょっとお話ししましたね。So the next question we have here is the section will be regarding coat and coat colors. How come the FCI breed standard of the Akita does not have proper description of the brindle color? Next question will be, why not marry two white Akitas together? So why not breed two white Akitas together? And up to what size are white spots on the neck or around the collar tolerated? How would you correct Akita coat, correct length of the outer coat, and texture in general? Okay, so we'll start with the question about the brindle color. まずトラゲからいくと、先ほどスタンダードの中で説明があった通り、赤が主体のスタンダードで。So to answer the question about the brindle, the standard was based on the red coloration in the breed. So portions of it do not necessarily cover brindle as well as they could. But as we've discussed, there's brindle is a correct coloration, white and red, and we will see different types of urajiro in these dogs. And as long as we are not seeing full coloration, the same type of coloration and hue that you would see in the upper body all the way down to the end of the toes, urajiro is not just white, but it's also the gradient part. So we want to see a lightening down to the feet and the extreme portions of the body, and that's correct. 次は、白の秋田犬をなぜ交配しないんですか？
交配しないというより、交配した結果がね、その白同士をかけた場合、フロントが白になってくる。そうすると粘膜色素がまず乗ってこない。要するに口唇の色、それからその微鏡の肛門の色、そういうものがその肉色になってくる。それがそのアルピノにつながるんだと思うしね。これはやっぱり白の場合、やっぱり有色犬にかけるのは使うのが一番いいと思うし、白をやってる人は白に赤をかけると今度は赤素質の白が出てくる。純白じゃなくてなんか赤みがかった白が出てきて、そういう意味で白を持っている人っていうのは白のメス持っている人は虎のオスにかけると虎の色のしっかりした色が出たり、白の純白の白が出たり、そういうことが結果的にそういうふうになってるんで、会員の間では白を持っている人はそういうかけ方をしています。
なるほど。はい。先ほどのブリンドルに関しての部分に一緒何かコメントありますか？大丈夫ですか？
これは大丈夫です。
はい。So the question was, why not breed two white Akitas together? And Kakita Sensei's reply was that, when we start to breed white dogs together, we will start to see a loss in pigment in the produced dogs. And because we are very much about preservation of the breed, a large part of this is the preservation of the genetic material. We'll start to see dogs with pink noses, clear nails, things like this. Also leading to, just loss of pigment, almost albino dogs. And so while white and red dogs will be bred together, and this helps to improve on the white dogs, not allowing them to be too white. And white and brindle will also is a good combination that a lot of breeders will do to breed brindle dogs to white dogs and things like that. So white dogs definitely have their place in the breed and in breeding programs. But as we discussed, that white on white leads to a degradation of the pigmentation in the breed, which is something that is not optimal for us. 大丈夫ですか？
はい、どうぞ。
はい、じゃあ次は、white spots on the neck. Up to what size are white spots on the neck or around the collar tolerated? I think 先ほどね、ちょっと説明があり
やっぱり
ましたけど、
これカラーにこれだからカラーがあるってことでしょ。カラ
そうですね
ーの中に
カラーはどこまで許されるかっていう質
で
問です。
もカラーはどこもほぼないです。ということは非常にその伝播する力が速いんで、小さなもんでもそれを同士かけていけば必ず大きくなってくるから、それだけはダメですね。
はい。So this was earlier in the slides that we have up here still. Actually, it covered how much is tolerated. So as long as the white does not go entirely around the neck, it is allowed. But Kawaki-sensei was saying that it's even to just have a slight collar or white markings on the neck is something that when you breed dogs like this, you will see a trend towards a greater expansion of white. So you need to keep that in mind and be very careful. Use it very carefully.
いいですか？
はい。
このカラーに関しては、秋田犬だけではなくてアメリカン国家でにしてもシェルティにしても白っていうのは優性遺伝なんでどんどん今川北さんが言われたように拡大していくんですよ。でそこで規制を設けるっていうことは非常に正しいことで、これ規制を設けなかったら白がどんどん拡大していくんですよ。でそれはアメリカン国家にしても白が優性される犬なんかは全ての犬種で規制をしますんで、これは正しいことだと思います。
That it's not just in the Akita Inu, but in other breeds like Cocker Spaniels and Shelties and things like this as well. Because white is a very strong gene, and if you don't place controls on the spread of white in a breed, it will continue to spread. So this is something that is very correct and very important as protectors and preservationists of the breed to continue to control the expansion of white in the coat.
昔秋田犬協会っていうのが秋田犬保存会と双璧の大きな団体があったんです、はい、その団体で秋田犬のトラを排斥したんです。でトラをダメだっていうことになってトラが使えなくなって皆さん白を使うようになってそれを支部でその会で奨励したために会員が皆さん白を使ってそうすると3年後にはヤギの展覧会みたいにね白ばっかりの犬になって非常につまらない犬になって赤もその頃まだ赤が少ない頃だったんでトラを排斥トラは秋田犬として良くないっていうことをその会は認めたらしくてそれを発表してみんなだから白と白をかけるようになって。そうすると展覧会見に行くと白のヤギの展覧会みたいなねそうすると味もそっけもない犬になってきて最終的にはつい4年前に何十年ってある歴史のある会が倒産してったやめてったってことがありますので白の後輩っていうのは難しいです。
There was another preservation society for the Akita Inu, which was called the Akita Inu Kyokai. So this is just a little interesting story, but at some point through their history, they decided to not allow brindle dogs, saying that it was not originally part of the breed. And what happened with this then, it led to where there were only red dogs and white dogs left. And because some of the white dogs were very nice, and this is something that has happened in the Kishu as well, the white dogs began to spread, and then towards the end, if you would go to one of their shows or exhibitions, it would be almost like looking at a flock of goats because all the dogs were white. And this was just because they decided to remove one coloration from the breed, which was brindle. Unfortunately, the Akita Inu Kyokai, after many decades of existence, finally was dissolved around 4 or 5 years ago.
あとあれですよね、爪と皮膚の色の問題ですよね。でやっぱり 白い犬って大概も白く爪がなるんで、白い爪っていうのは非常に柔らかいっていうのと、白い肌っていうのは非常に裂けやすいで、黒い肌っていうのは裂けにくいって硬いっていうよく言われてますよね。だからプードルなんかでも今言われてるのは、ホワイトカラーのブラックスキンっていうのが理想的な色のカラーです。で、白い犬であっても肌が黒いホワイトカラーのブラックスキンっていうのが本当のプードルのカラーバリエーションの中の重要な皮膚の色です。
And an aside to the discussion about white dogs, the control of white in the breed, one thing would be that it's not just in the coat or in the pigment of the nose, but also that the pigment in things like nails and skin, because the lack of keratin in places like the nails or the pads, and also the lack of keratin in the nails will lead to weaker nails. White nails tend to wear faster than nails with pigment. Also, we are looking for more pigment in the skin as well. And for instance, in the poodle, we're looking for white color but with black skin now, because it's actually a stronger type of skin, whereas a lot of white dogs with white or pink skin tend to have weaker skin. So again, in trying to preserve a breed and trying to preserve the genetics for future generations, the good genetics moving forward, is important to keep these good genetics in the breed. And one way to do that is to definitely always control the spread of white in the breed, or be aware of it. 次は、毛質ですね。その毛の長さとか、これだ。毛の長さに一般的な正しい秋田の紐を。
大体5センチから6センチってことですね。
So the question is, how would you describe the correct Akita coat, correct length of the outer coat, and texture in general?
帯は長いです。
So to start with, according to the standard, the length is generally between like 5.5 to 6 centimeters long is what the standard calls for. With Kawakita Sensei adding that the length of the coat on the tail will generally tend to be a little bit longer. それで、先ほど
ダブルコートの犬の一番特徴っていうのは、アンダーコートがあってオーバーコートを乖離させるっていうのがダブルコートなんです。でそれは秋田犬だけではなくて、柴犬でもサモエドでもキースホンドでもペキニーズでも全て同じ毛質交代してるんですよ。でそこで何が必要かっていうのは、アンダーコートがあってオーバーコートを乖離させるときに、オーバーコートが硬いハッシュコートであるっていうことは非常に大事なコートなんです。
はい。So to start with, if we can, as Kai Sensei mentioned, we have the actual length, but President Besho is saying that, well, if we go back to the foundation of what a double coat is, or a correct double coat, we have an undercoat, and then we have an outer coat. The undercoat is a thick undercoat that makes the outer coat stand properly. The outer coat, though, should be a correct, and according to the standard, calls for a harsh coat. A harsh coat is something to keep in mind.
でその中でやはりその一番正しい毛質は何かっていうのは、最近の諸外国で審査した時にドッグショーの開催される前の日に犬を洗ったり、またはリンスされて犬の毛質の油分を全部取っちゃって、中にはリンスを入れたりして毛質がすごく柔らかくなってるんです。だから本来の犬の毛質じゃなくて逆作用で、その本当の毛質じゃないような柔らかい毛質になっちゃってて、実際のその硬い毛質が逆作用になってるって、多分ヨーロッパの人たちが錯覚されてるのは、細い短い毛が綺麗だと思われてるんじゃないかなと思うんですけど、で決してそのリンスなんか入れたら毛が柔らかくなっちゃうんで、決してはいけないことだと僕は思ってます。
So the standard calls for a harsh coat, and if we're discussing what is best or preferred. Something that Besho-san sees a lot when he goes to judge in shows and things like this is that we'll go to a show and be trying to judge a dog's coat, and a lot of the dogs have been completely groomed the day just before the show. So they've been washed with, they've been shampooed and had all their natural oils from their coat removed, and then rinsed as well. So what happens then is we actually lose the ability to judge the true quality of the coat and what it should be like in its most natural condition. And we were discussing this point earlier with the three of us and talking about how this is a hunting breed, a breed that hunts and needs to maintain a coat to hunt in harsh environments. If it suddenly is in Akita and it starts snowing, blizzarding, the dog needs to be able to handle this. And judge in the ring is technically trying to judge if the dog still has the ability, the coat still has the ability to do these things that it was bred to do. So it's very important to not only breed dogs with better harsh coats, but also for the owners and handlers to understand how to present a dog in its most natural coat. じゃあ次は、regarding movement and gait.
ムーブメントこの先ほど全部詳しく説明したので、
What should be the correct gait of an Akita, and what is the typical and correct gait movement for the Akita? So we have two questions which are essentially the same, which Besho-san covered earlier. It's short tracking with a shallower angle in the shoulders and in the rear as well, which leads to a short tracking movement. We are not looking for massive amounts of reach or stride. It is a non-continental type of movement. はい。で、次は section 5 regarding illness. What are the latest news about Akita molecular genetics discovery? Anything about coat, colors, health, etc. Management of illness like SA and VKH in Japan.
これはうちのジャパンケネルクラブの WAC の事務局の方からデータが出てるんで、これを読み上げてもらえますか。
はい。So this is about, to start with, about sebaceous adenitis, about SA, which is obviously an issue that is in the Akita Inu that we are all aware of. So we have been doing research with the Göttingen University in Germany from 2003. The WUAC has asked the professor there to look into this issue in the breed. Research was ongoing from 2012, April. Dr. Pfeiffer was doing research on this. And while they have found some markers that seem to be attached to SA, they were unable to prove at the time that, or deduct that the SA was actually a hereditary issue. They couldn't find the exact markers to develop a testing regimen for it. To continue the research further was going to be very costly, and so the research on SA by the WUAC was stopped in 2012 April, and that's as far as they've gotten as far as sebaceous adenitis goes. それ以外は
でここに書いてあるように具体的に重大な遺伝疾患っていうことは認められなかったっていうことで、WAC というよりも JKC もその遺伝疾患の重要な遺伝疾患に関しては非常に関心があって、これに対しては非常に重くを感じてるんで、例えばこれが今後重要な遺伝疾患っていうことが正確にあれば JKC もここの部分はもっと原因を突き止めていきたいとは思っています。
So while in the earlier statement, the data we have there, it said the WAC, but obviously this was in conjunction with the Japan Kennel Club. And the JKC does definitely place a lot of weight in controlling and understanding and researching hereditary diseases in the breeds that we are breeding. And so for the Akita Inu, if we can collect more data, I think at the time there was not enough data to show a hereditary link to the disease. But if we can move forward with having enough data to actually push this forward and show that it's a hereditary issue, the JKC would definitely be interested in pursuing that and trying to better the future health of the breed. で、もう一つ、先ほど話があったように、そういう遺伝子疾患とかそういうのに関しては、スタンダードもそうですけど、北犬保存会とか、その、犬種をコントロールしている検疫、登録機関があって、そういうところがリードを取って、そういう遺伝疾患とかそういうのもあって、で、こっちに報告があれば一緒にやりたい研究してやりたいですねと。So another, we were just discussing this earlier, this issue with other hereditary or genetic issues or health issues in the breed, is that here in Japan, as we've mentioned many times in the seminar, we have the Japan Kennel Club as the official FCI club for Japan, but we also have Akiho, which is the breed club, the preservation breed club. So at the JKC, we tend to defer to Akiho on matters concerning the individual breed. And Akiho, we hope, will continue to do more research into the preservation of the breed as well as genetic issues. And then if issues that Akiho brings to our attention as the FCI parent club for Japan, we would definitely like to work with Akiho in the future to do more research into issues that do affect this breed that we love.
それでは最後の締めの挨拶として、今回2時間余りの、セミナーになって、国によっては深夜になる国もあったと思いますが、本当にこの多数の方に参加いただき誠にありがとうございました。
So in closing, we've had this seminar, this Zoom seminar with you today, and it's been about 2 hours, and we know that for many of you, this is not an easy time of day to be awake. For some people, it's probably well into the night and midnight, but it was a joy and an honor to be able to spend this time with you. Thank you very much, and we look forward to meeting you again soon.
それでは最後に、今回本当にお世話になった川北先生、また並びに通訳の加藤先生に、感謝の気持ちを込めましてありがとうございました。ありがとうございました。
In closing, thank you very much to Kawakita Sensei for being with us here today, and to myself for interpreting. Thank you, it was an honor. Please have a great day, evening, night, wherever you are, and we look soon.
はい、バイバイ。